Hello and welcome back to the TVBinges.com Pilot Roundtable, a Southgate Media Group podcast. I'm Kyle Tremblay, the editor of TVBinges.com, and I am joined as always by a fellow TV Binges writer. She's got all kinds of superpowers, but she's stuck fetching sandwiches for Callista Flockhart. It's Olivia Richards. Hello.
I'm gonna add that to my Twitter profile.
That's your job now.
Yeah, I'm a Supergirl.
Supergirl?
Secretly.
Also a gopher.
Also personal assistant.
Yes, right. Supergirl / personal assistant. It's on your business cards and everything.
Right.
So if the listeners have not guessed by now, we are talking about what is shockingly, and I might be wrong about this because it seems so shocking, but our first superhero show of the season? Our first new one? Somehow. Last season we had about 9. This is our first one of the season, and it's CBS's, by my count, first superhero show that they've done in this modern era. It is Supergirl. Olivia, what did you think?
Well, I think, what you had said before, where it's like we've had all these other superhero shows, but none of them have been women. And I think, really it's 2015 now, and we are so at the point where it's like, finally, this is happening. And finally, this is now a major network show that really has been such a long time coming.
Right. And I think that's the right place to start here, because that, I think, is a lot of the story. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of the central element of this pilot. It is certainly remarked upon within the context of the show to an extent that is almost jarring, how meta this pilot gets. What did you think of this show's self-described feminism?
I love it, because I thought, first and foremost, I was a little bit off-put by the title, because I was like, okay, Supergirl, but it's like when she was described as being 24 and being like a working professional and being around that age, like being 23, like if somebody was like, oh, like being referred to as a girl who's, like in the workforce, it is very demeaning and kind of derogatory, because it's like at that point, you don't really, you wouldn't hear like a male colleague be called a boy, like, right. But then the fact that they reference that within the show, and you have Callista Flockhart saying like, oh, I'm like a really powerful boss, and like I have all these, resources that, like at the tips of my fingers, and like I have, all this power, but I'm still a girl, like there's nothing wrong with that. And I love the narrative that the show has, and that, finally we're addressing this, because that someone is making points about it somewhere, and that, the show being self-aware, I really like how they kind of weave that into the show itself.
Yeah, that scene with Callista Flockhart was the scene that I was referencing earlier about the show getting really meta, where she could have just turned to camera and talked to the audience, basically. That was what I would call a very defensive scene. I think that scene was designed to specifically address the worries that you had going in about the use of the word girl, calling her Supergirl instead of Superwoman. It was clearly designed as a scene to the audience to justify that, which is something that is not as tactful as I generally like in my TV, but I understand that they felt the need to address it, and they kind of had to do it. I'm of two minds about it, because I've made this criticism of other shows, and shows that you have 100% of the time been on board with, and I tend to not be on board with. So this is another example of what I would call Spice Girls feminism, where it's a lot of raw go women, as opposed to what I would call like modern feminism, which is more in depth. Like, there's just a lot of, especially with the villain in this episode, where he's like, oh, a girl can't beat me, and she's like, oh yeah? Watch this. It was literally out of the Spice Girls movie. Like, it's, and it's like, that certainly has a place, but maybe in 2015, I would hope that we've moved on from that, and can have a little more nuanced portrayal, rather than just, let's have a pep rally for feminism. Like an example that I use of a show that I think is truly feminist is like The Americans, where where Elizabeth Jennings, it's a show about a couple, Elizabeth and Peter Jennings, who are spies, and Elizabeth, played by Kerry Russell, is the more competent of the two. They're both really good spies. Elizabeth is more competent, she's more ruthless, she's more businesslike, she's less emotional. and that's never commented upon in the show in a meta way, that like the way that this pilot dealt with its feminism. But to me, that's what feminism is the idea that a woman can, that the man doesn't have to be the business-like one, that, you know, in a traditional show, quote unquote traditional, Peter would have been that, and Elizabeth would have been the flighty one who, you know, who lets her emotions get in the way. But that's Peter. Elizabeth is the stone cold killer, you know, and that I think is, to me, that's more compelling than having a villain say, you know, you're a girl, you can't do anything, just in like the modern context. But at the same time, at the same time, uh, this is the world of comic books, which is a just in superheroes, which is just a male-dominated world, and probably exists in a time when modern feminism would either fall upon deaf ears or be loudly outcried. So I totally understand why they went with this, why Greg Berlanti and co. had this vision for the show, because maybe within the context of a superhero show, this is kind of what they need. We sort of need to turn back the clock 15 years and engage the like this, just because the intended audience for this show is people who maybe don't have a nuanced enough way of thinking to really grapple with a more technical approach.
I completely, yeah, I definitely agree. And like, I feel like, you know, even just like within this character, because like you think about like a woman in, like you had said before, in the comic book universe, there would have been a place for her, and it would have been as a sidekick or the person who's getting saved, or yeah, like, you know, just sort of like a side story, but like really nothing that's been like developed in any way. So I feel like, you know, by kind of introducing that as part of the plot and then moving it out of where normally this character would have been placed within the universe, I think I really, really appreciated that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So aside from that discussion, what did you think of this as a show? You know, aside from all the sort of social issues, what were your thoughts about this as just a TV show?
I just really like the way the characters were written, and I almost feel like I got kind of like a Buffy the Vampire
Mm.
Slayer-esque vibe off of it, because I just really enjoyed the way that the characters were written and the way that the relationships all came together, because really it's not enough in a show like this to just have Kara stand on her own, even though she totally does, but to have her have this kind of dynamic group of people around her. Like, I love the relationship they developed with her sister. I love the relationship she developed with her coworker. I love what they did with Callista Flockhart, and to have, you know, all these villains coming in and having, you know, really the typical like save the day sort of story arc going on in the background, and seeing her develop into her new abilities. I really think that there's something compelling about this show that I really enjoy watching.
Interesting, yeah, because it certainly, the bones of this show are as a very traditional kind of superhero drama. It's the same. It's by the same guy, of course, Gregor Berlanti, who does the Flash and who did Arrow. So I mean, it's in that genre where, you know, there's going to be a villain every week, and there's going to be an overarching story, and, you know, there's going to be some romance, and but it boils down to basically a procedural where a superhero thwarts villains.
Yep.
Um, I found the villain kind of boring in this episode.
A
I don't
little
think,
bit, yeah.
yeah, I don't think he provided a lot. It seemed like a lot to introduce this entire, like, maybe it's just because I'm not familiar at all with any of this, but it they introduce like he's from an alien planet and all that. I mean, the sort of impetus for the show is that that Supergirl's was sent with Superman at the same time from Krypton. Oh gosh, I already feel like a nerd. From Krypton to Earth, but Supergirl's pod got sidetracked, and then when she arrived at Earth, her pod brought with her a prison space barge filled with the galaxy's worst criminals, and now they are all loose on Earth, and so she feels an obligation to stop them. That is my understanding of the premise of this show.
That's basically mine, like roughly.
Yeah,
Except you
so
put it into words. Mine is like, oh, she came down in like a pod, and like Superman was also there, and then she's there, and she has powers.
yeah,
She didn't use them until later.
right. Yeah, this is another example of you and I trying to make our way through a comic book superhero show, and neither of us are.
Struggle.
Yeah, it's a struggle, but I mean, you know, it does help, I think, coming in with no familiarity or minimal familiarity with the material, because then it, you know, you can sort of judge it as a show. and it's a show you obviously like. So you you just like, did you like this the same way like you like The Flash, or what? Because I'm trying to get it, because you're not a procedural person, and
I'm
this is
not at
this is
all.
a procedural, more or less. So you just really like identified with the characters, or what was it that differentiates this from, say, one of the mini procedurals that airs and that we give thumbs down to?
I really feel like it was the characters because a lot of the times it's really like with the Flash, it's like it is original in its own way because they're like kind of revamping it, but it's like again, it's the same male character. It's kind of the same story of like, we see a guy grow into his abilities and he's part of something that's bigger than him at the moment and he's about to find that out, but it's like you don't get to see really like a young woman doing the same thing in a way and really introducing a woman and giving her her own role in a superhero show. That's its own thing, but then also like I really feel like it knows its audience because like watching as a woman around the same age as this girl is navigating the workforce for the first time and kind of developing and analyzing her relationships with the people around her. I feel like there was something that was just very like welcoming and warm about watching that because I'm like, oh my God, like I'm there too. I completely understand. Like I would do a lot of the same things. And I really appreciated the kind of take that the show gave to that.
Absolutely. I think we've learned from The Flash, and I think the people making these shows learned from The Flash, that if you're adapting a superhero property to TV, it's so much better to go light with it. It's so much better to have that warmth that you were talking about. That have it be likable characters and people you want. Because television as a medium is about people who you wouldn't mind spending 60 hours of your life with.
Oh yeah.
It's 5 seasons. It's like all you want TV to be about people that you enjoy spending time with, and certainly there are many ways to accomplish that, but that's the bottom line. And with movies, when it's only a 2.5 hour commitment, you can make a movie very dark. You can make a hero difficult, and you can really sort of lean into the anti-hero idea, because everyone knows that with a movie you're only spending a very limited amount of time with them. And so I think this show very smartly, and we should talk about Melissa Benoist, the who plays the eponymous Supergirl. That I think that she is very well cast, and that she gives this show exactly what it needs, which is that warmth and that smile and that sort of brightness that really helps inform this world and differentiate it from something like Zack Snyder's Man of Steel or something. Like making
Yeah.
this a more likable world. And certainly those ideas of like fear of aliens is still present in this world, but our lead is so sort of bright and sunny, and like you said, new to the workforce and sort of trying to make her way, that you can't help but root for her. And in that way, it's almost like Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. In that,
Oh, that's a really good point.
right? Yeah, it's kind of that show about a sort of sheltered girl who is now just sort of coming into her own due to circumstances that were largely outside of her control, and so it's kind of like that, except with superpowers. What did you think about her performance?
I loved her in this because
Yeah.
I think what we kind of just touched on is like I don't like the idea that you have to be dark and tortured to be complicated because like you have a character like Kimmy Schmidt and you have a character like Kara who like I don't like it when it's like optimism and youth is seen as simple because like it's really how you layer it within the character's life and giving the character that backstory and letting the audience get to know the character and like exactly who they are and what their relationships are and what their role is in the world that they live in that you're setting up. And like for me, watching her performance, you get to see that she is a complicated character without having it be this very deep, dark, heavy force on screen to have to get through.
Yeah, I mean, she's never going to have like a ton of layers, because this is a CBS drama. It's not going to be Mad Men. But I agree that there's enough here that it's not one note, and her performance really helps drive that home. That there's a clear conception of who that character is, which I appreciate. That the show has an idea of who she is, and that I think is an important element of this kind of show. Whereas like with something like Agents of Shield, when that show premiered, I felt strongly that the show didn't have any idea who those characters were, and that's one of the reasons Agents of Shield really stumbled in its first season before sort of figuring it out. So I think here's Supergirl is starting from a more solid place. Also starting from a more solid place in terms of ratings, because this show did a 3.2 demo rating with 12.9 million viewers, which is one of our biggest premieres of the season. It is a certifiable hit. I will be curious how that holds up, seeing as I talked about, a lot of these sort of dudes who watch superhero shows might have been turned off by the feminism element, by the overt feminism of the show. So it'll be interesting. This is a sort of interesting test case for female superheroes, which probably isn't fair to put on one show's shoulders, but it is what it is. Someone who was not turned off by the show was Jeb Bush, who said that he would be watching because Melissa Benoist is quote unquote kind of hot. So,
oh god.
Thanks, Jeb.
Well, they did throw in the scene where she's trying on the outfit, so I'm sure that was his favorite scene in the whole thing.
Oh yeah, he that's on his DVR. So keeping with the GOP candidate theme, we normally do cancels quickly, makes it through the season, or renewed for next season. But because this was a question asked to, I think it was Lindsey Graham, we're going to go with Olivia for Supergirl. Would you rather marry, date, or make vanish?
Oh my god. Oh Jesus. What were my options again?
Well, you can marry it, which in my little equivalency means multiple seasons. You can date it, which means one full season, or you can make it vanish, which means it goes off the air before. I
really want to marry this show.
There you go.
This fly into its next season, and seasons after that.
Well, Jeb approves, but the GOP is unhappy that you've chosen to marry Supergirl for obvious reasons. So,
I know.
I agree with you. I think that this show is going to last multiple seasons. I think it's a hit. I think as much as I sort of don't love the rah-rah brand of feminism, I do understand its necessity in this case, and I think that it is doing more good than bad here. I think that yeah, right. Like the net effect here, considering that it's a superhero show, considering that they're generally not very good with women, I think the net effect here is definitely positive. And so, given the ratings, I think that this one's going to last multiple seasons. So, Olivia, final verdict: thumbs up or thumbs down on Supergirl?
This is 2 super thumbs up.
Super thumbs up.
2 super thumbs up.
This is a thumbs up from me. I think that it was, as a television show, it was perfectly fine. It's got a very likable lead. It got through its material okay. I think there are certainly areas it can improve. As a sort of social symbol, it's I like it a little bit more than as a television show, but overall, I can't find really any reason to not give this a thumbs up. So, you've been listening to The Pilot Roundtable, a TVBinges.com and Southgate Media Group production. You can listen to all of our episodes on iTunes, where you can rate and review us. We'd appreciate that. Or find us at SouthgateMediaGroup.com. Follow Olivia on Twitter at RichardsOlivia, and me on Twitter at KyleLovesTV. Till next time!